I'm a little late for this, but April Fool's Day was a few days ago, and usually I don't give it much thought because I don't have the preparation to do any pranks. I used to do pranks, but anyways, that's not the point. What is the point is that there is a misconception flying around about the origin of April Fool's Day. You might have heard this one, and people say that the origin is that the year used to start on April 1st, but the introduction of the Gregorian calendar changed the date to January 1st, so anyone who was caught celebrating the new year on April 1st was considered the April Fool and made fun of and all this other stuff. But that doesn't, there's a few problems with that, but I'll just say, just from listening to that, that doesn't explain why we do pranks on that day. I mean, making fun of someone is not the same as creating a holiday where that surrounds around playing jokes and pranks on everyone. So, where does that come from? And another thing, if you know anything about Latin, you realize that that's really off. Because, let's just look at the names of the months. I remember learning way back in, I remember hearing that like way back in elementary school, I think like grade 1 or 2. I wasn't very good at math back then, I was still learning to count anyways, and I realized this mistake later, so I was confused for years actually until I learned the actual reason. But if you look at the last 4 months of the year, September, October, December, November, December, you'll notice set, oct, nov, dec. 7, 8, 9, 10. They're like, wait a second, that's too off. And so I was told the explanation for that was the April Fool's thing, and I was like, oh cool, 2 facts in 1. But then I'm like, wait a second, that would be 4 months off, not 2. And then I learned many years later that the actual reason why there's that kind of fudge up is because the calendar, until before 2 people came into power in a second, was 10 months long. Obviously it wasn't that the year was shorter, it was just the months were longer. Anyways, but then Caesar Augustus got crowned Caesar and everything else, and everyone thought he was a demigod and all this other stuff, and he was praised by the people. He got a month named after him, August. And then after that, Julius Caesar named himself a Caesar, and you can actually, it's kind of interesting because the people named Augustus Caesar, but Julius named himself Caesar, and you can kind of tell that by where Caesar is placed. Anyways, so, and then he decided that he wanted the same thing as the only previous Caesar, because Caesar's not a name, by the way, it's a title. Anyways, the only previous Caesar, so he decided to give himself a month in July. And so that added 2 months, July and August, and making it 12 months long and having that little fudge up. Because again, Latin, Rome, all this other stuff. And then the calendar that was used for a good 1,537 years was the Julian calendar, which is extraordinarily similar to the one we use today, the Gregorian calendar, with only a few small differences, which I'll get into. So that calendar was used, and like the last edit to that calendar until Pope Greg the 13th came around was that they added July, and then that stayed the same for again like a century and a half, or a millennia and a half. And then Pope Gregory came in, and he's like, okay, we gotta fix this calendar, it's got a few fudges up. The length isn't quite right, it's actually off by like 0.0 or whatever percent, so less than a day. It's actually off by the amount, so we'll fix that time, plus the leap year being like in the middle of February doesn't make any fucking sense. Let's put it at the end of February. And let's fix where Easter's gonna be. That's basically it. That's all the changes that the Gregorian whatever made to it. The years had been at January 1st since 45 BCE, which is the same thing as BC, by the way, before Common Era, before Christ, whatever you want to use. Anyways, so January 1st had been there like a good 1,537 years before Greg came in and did his thing. So you might be asking now, it's like, okay, so if the whole April being the wrong time of the beginning of the year isn't the cause, then what the hell is the origins for April Fools? Now, around the world, for long before any of these calendars existed, there around that time of the year, so the last week of March, end of March, early April, there had been kind of celebrations of this sort. So, you know, playing jokes or pranks or being silly and like a fool or whatever at that time of the year, because, you know, we just got past the equinox, so the days are finally going to be longer than the nights, and also we just got a winter, spring is starting, and also everyone you love just died, so let's try to get your mind off of it, because a lot of people didn't survive winters back then. So it was just basically like everyone being silly and goofing off and being like idiots, basically, because they're just so happy it's fucking spring finally. So there was also many different cultures spanning millennia behind us, and holidays around that time of the year that were centered around that. So it was already a thing before anything of the April Fool's kind came about. But where the actual April Fool's comes from, there's a few different things, that one being one of it, but one of the biggest things that people are kind of trying to pinpoint it was Constantine, who was the last Roman emperor. He there was a town, or the square's fool, or whatever, like the fool, the jester, whatever the hell, joked to him that he said, I could probably run this country better than you. And so Constantine, alright, let's see how you do for a day, and then he chose April 1st, and he ruled it for a day, and it was just a bunch of silly, goofing shenanigans and everything else, and everyone thought it was hilarious. So they decided to have this, you know, it became a yearly event on April 1st, having a jester or a fool, like, make up stupid laws and have everyone play, you know, do stupid stuff all over the place ruling this country. That was already on its fucking knees by then, because there's a reason, like, Constantine was the last Roman Empire, because the Roman Empire was on its fucking knees. It was already crumbling to dust. So it was kind of like, oh, let's just do whatever the fuck we want right now. I mean, I've already screwed it off. I've already introduced Christianity. Let's just be silly. So, so yeah, there's that origin. And the whole year thing, it does have a mild origin in truth, but again, it's mild. It's because, according to the Earth, the beginning of the year, people, like farmers and stuff like that, in a lot of European towns, it wasn't ever country official, it was townspeople, average folk who couldn't even read, let's be honest, would celebrate the beginning of the year at that time too, because, you know, kind of like with life, everything starts all fresh and everything else in spring, and then as the year gets on, everything dies and everything's dead in winter. So that's how they saw it going like that. So that's why they chose spring as the time to celebrate, and it was mostly just because they were celebrating around the time of the year, so the earth, because they were farmers, so everything was surrounding around that, the seasons and everything else, because it was really important to know when you plant your crops and everything else. So all that, so that's where that was from. So some of the so they were basing the year off of the earth and not history. So some of the more intellectuals would sometimes mock the common folk, but it wasn't like a huge thing enough to get a holiday after it. So yeah, so that's the closest there is, and it wasn't even April 1st, it was March 25th, and which is like a few days after the equinox, although they used to have a week celebration, which would include all this, you know, tomfoolery, that would end on April 1st, so that's all of that. So now, why do I know all of this? Is because someone posted that thing, and I'm like, it's fucking false. I know that because the Gregorian and stuff like that. I know about the Julian, and I looked it up, and I turned it one thing to the other, and I fucking know everything about April Fools now. Just from random Googling and to link clicking and all this other stuff. So I'll put sources in the comment section, and my Tumblr post explaining all of this in case you want to share it with your friends in one concise, readable thingy-ma-whatsy. Thanks for watching, and I hope I made you smarter.